What is the trick to teaching a class? Tell us, maestro. Well, now that you ask, you've just made your first mistake. You don't teach, young apprentice. You simply tune them up, conduct, and let the hymnal music cometh forth. Tap your baton. Take the register. Daniel McIntosh. Here, sir. Tory Walsh. Sir. Now, today, class, we're going to think about voices. Voices, sir. Yes, Daniel, the suppressed voices of the working class as expressed through our nation's literature. Like funny voices, sir. Daniel does funny voices off the telly, comedians, sketch shows, catchphrases. The class laugh now. They have opened. The tenor of their wee thoughts is buzzing in the air, but you must bring them under control, and quickly. You must also do a funny voice off the telly to prove that you understand their youth culture frame of reference. And if you succeed, they will laugh, and you can grasp the threads of their attention from the air, fine like spider silk, draw them away from Daniel McIntosh and towards you. Maestro, you have your orchestra. You have them in. Now you should hear the lovely sound of their listening, pitch sharp, dog sharp, surf sharp, the edge of their attention singing, and you sharpen those notes further, grind them against the whetstone of your knowledge, so that by the end of the lesson they are in harmony with each other. Like so, you have 5 minutes. A lesson is always 5 minutes. Even if a lesson is 45 minutes, it is still only 5 minutes. This is because after 5 minutes, you will lose their interest, so you move on. Control your orchestra. You are the conductor. Hit them. Tame their childish souls with your passion for literature. Make them laugh. Make them question. Make them think. Think about the structures that surround you every day, class. Sex, race, religion. Screw religion, my young apprentices. A religious brain is a closed brain. Your minds are not closed. What are they, class? Open, sir. Indeed, class. You are individuals. What are you, class? Individuals, sir. Now, bring them up, up, lower, lower, toccata and fugue. Some kid will fart a bassoon. Wagner. Neutralise them. Cover it with a joke of your own. Move on. Move on. Keep going. Don't give them an opening. This ain't freeform jazz. You are the conductor. Keep it going. Ti-tum, ti-tum, ti-tum. Fuck yeah. Now they know what a simile is. When Charlie had been a trainee teacher, he'd heard this talk from the headmaster of a Catholic school. A Catholic school. What could Charlie, an atheist, learn from them? But he was given practical advice, this guy, which the trainees wanted to hear. Tell us what to do when the kids set fire to the desks. Everyone laughed. The headmaster smiled and leaned into the lectern. Listen, guys, you learn to come and go with the kids. It's no a war. Order has to be maintained, certainly. You need to get the class under control. But teaching is about love. You can't expect to be a good teacher if you care more about discipline than love. And Charlie had thought, yeah. Thank you. So, as you can see, I used to be a teacher. Not for very long, right enough, and quite a long time ago. It was in the 90s, and I lasted about 6 months because I realised it was hard work. And that if I was going to remain a teacher, I would probably never be a writer. So I went back to university to study, and that's when I wrote my first novel, Boy Racers, which came out shortly after that. And I never went back to teaching in a formal, employed capacity. But because Boy Racers was about Scottish teenagers, I was often invited into schools to talk about my work and about Scottish literature and to teach creative writing. And that's mainly what I'm going to be here to talk about today. How many people here are school teachers? Right, okay, so you'll know how much work it is. How many people here teach creative writing? Right, so you'll know how much work it is. Young people find creative writing quite intimidating because they maybe feel it's not for them. They maybe feel it's the sort of thing that is expected of them, but they don't really want to do. They might not be very engaged readers, so therefore they don't see writing as particularly relevant, because those two things come hand in hand. It's probably no surprise that the young people who are most interested in being writers are the ones who read the most fiction. I feel, having taught creative writing in a school context for nearly 20 years now, and having been a writer myself, that that's a fallacy. Creative writing is something that absolutely everybody can do. Some people are better at it than others, but you know, some people are better at wiring a plug than others. It's still something that everybody can do. And it's not a very romantic way of looking at fiction, but it's also a bit like wiring a plug. There are certain things that you can do, and if you do them in the correct order, in the correct way, with enough conviction, you'll write a story that manages to engage a reader. Because storytelling is actually something that we all do instinctively anyway. It's in our DNA. It's how we bond with each other as people. It's how we've always done it. Ugg comes back to the campfire. All right, Ugg, how did you get on with hunting that mammoth? Oh, well, it was a nightmare. It was really big. I'd never seen a mammoth before. Nobody tell me how big they were. I thought they were like the size of dogs. Oh, no, mate, they're huge. Now you know. Well, it took about 12 years to bring that thing down. Oh, but you'll never guess this, right? See, when we had it tied, and then its trunk is flapping about like that, and it knocked James over, and he went fleeing. Oh, brilliant, James! That kind of stuff, right? It goes back to the dawn of time. Children, sit round the campfire. We're going to tell you the stories of our ancestors. Everybody can tell a story. We do it every day. You come home to your husband or your wife or your flatmate. What happened to you today? Oh, there was this guy in the bus. Honestly, what a pain in the arse he was. And you'll tell this story about this guy in the bus who was a pain in the arse and what happened when somebody else got up and challenged them and it all got very tense. That's the sort of thing that children can do. So it's a matter of saying to them, you are already a storyteller. I could ask you to tell me a story of what happened at the weekend, and you'd all be able to do it. And you'd all be able to find the humour in it, and the dramatic moments in it. And you'd all exaggerate for dramatic effect, and edit bits out that aren't relevant to the story, and bring it to a narrative climax, and instinctively let us feel what the moral of that story was. All you can do this all the time. So think of yourself as storytellers from the word go. Your job as creative writing teachers is to help them refine their technique. That's your job as teachers anyway. As I was saying in that opening paragraph from Death of a Ladies' Man, the music is already in them. It's your job as teachers to just bring it out. The stories are already in them, and it's your job as teachers to just bring it out. So the two things, because I'm going to try and keep it simple here today, we've only got half an hour. The two things that you need to help them with the most, the two things that make good creative writing, are structure and style. Now, because we're all readers, we understand that when we read genre fiction, we're mainly in it for the story. We expect a really pacey, well-told narrative that has twists and turns, that brings out surprises at the right moments, that knows when to slow things down and when to speed things up, and that reaches a narrative conclusion that's satisfying. When we read literary fiction, we're often in it because we want a particular distinctive vision or voice or take on the world, or the feeling that we are engaging with a mind that is unique. A book that could only be written by that writer. That's really what differentiates literary fiction from genre fiction. And I'm not being a snob about these things. I like both. The writers, I think, that really connect with us the most are the ones that do both, that manage to construct a well-told story that's pacey and reaches a satisfying narrative conclusion, but also has a distinctive vision and voice. James Hogg, I would argue, is one of those writers. Basically invented the serial killer novel, as we still know it today, and yet was formally experimental and manages to employ different literary registers and bring them in at certain moments in order to achieve certain effects. And we could probably all think of writers that marry style and structure. The Great Gatsby is probably another perfect example. Beautiful, poetic, rich, luscious, gorgeous prose, but by God, if that novel doesn't zip along. So I'm going to talk about these things separately. First of all, style. Really, when you are teaching English, a lot of the time you're trying to get them to be more refined in their use of English. So that involves, obviously, the basics like punctuation, grammar, but also, you know, gradually leading them away from the adverb. The adverb is nobody's friend. Do you know what I mean? He ran quickly. How do you run slowly? He shouted loudly, right? You know, that kind of thing. They feel that that's good writing, and it's your job to kind of point out that actually sometimes less is more. Do you really need all those words? You're trying to increase their powers of description, to employ similes and metaphors that make their world that they're writing about seem fresh and alive and pop off the page. And temper their excesses as well. So that is stuff that you already know how to do. You're teachers of English, or even if you're not teaching English, you use language with them every day. We didn't think of that as style, but it is. But one of the things about style that really releases something in young people, I've found, is when you encourage them to abandon all of that. Because they go, what? Hang on, I didn't have to write in a way that's formal and clipped and precise and is of a certain register that they feel that they've got to raise themselves towards and that they're constantly chasing. Because we all know writers that go completely in the opposite direction. I mean, we'll all remember that first experience of reading Trainspotting. I mean, I was 18 when that book came out, so I was its target audience. Boom. It was like a revolution. It was like a bomb going off in the world of literature, especially in Scotland. But no, just that book travelled the world. And I picked it up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, the sweat was lashing off a sick boy, he was trembling. And it took me 2 or 3 pages before I realised, oh, this is the way I talk. No, since the Bruins had I ever seen colloquial language like that written down. And that was what was revolutionary about it. And I was like, this is a literary novel that has been acclaimed all over the world. It was also hip. That was the thing at the time. Like, everybody read that novel. And yet it was written the way that me and my mates spoke. I didn't think that was allowed. So when you start telling them that, you can write the way that you talk. That's perfectly legitimate. In fact, not only is it legitimate, but that also might be your voice. Don't be afraid of that. But in conjunction with that, you can also introduce them to stream of consciousness, where you abandon what we understand of as the conventional rules in order for something that feels like thought. And you get a writer like James Kelman who does both of these. He uses, well, I don't know if he would call it the Scots language. He uses the language of the working class in a stream of consciousness style that replicates thought. Although I actually tripped up with him one time, because it's easy to do that when you talk to James Kelman. Minefields everywhere. Love the guy, but you're like, oh, right, okay, I better. I mean, tiptoe around this before I trip a wire and then it comes at you. And I said to him, you know, what you've done with that style is you've perfectly mimicked thought. And he was like, I'm going to stop you there. I've not mimicked anything. It is thought. Which is a crucial distinction. So that's something that you can tell them, that the way that they think, the way that they talk, can be the perfect vehicle for telling the story that they want to tell, especially if it's a story about their lives or in the lives of the people they know. It might be the appropriate register to employ. Structure is harder because structure's no fun in the way that style is. Style pops, structure should be invisible. If we read a novel or watch a film or a TV series and it's well structured, we don't even notice because the girders that hold it together are invisible. When we start to get bored and we're looking at our phone and we're like, what's happening here? How did we get to that? I'm not following this. That's when we realised it's been poorly structured. And if they want to tell a well-told story, they have to engage with structure at some point. So I try and break it down to the simplest elements, no overcomplicate it. And actually the simplest elements go way back to Aristotle in the Poetics. He wrote them down and they're still relevant to this day. 330 BC, so I'm going to tell you what they are. This is how he defines plot. First of all, a logically connected order with a beginning, a middle and an end. We all understand that. But it's still worthwhile telling that to young people because you start to embed the idea of the three-act structure. And another way that I explain it to them is the way that I heard Steven Spielberg describe it one time in an interview. Act 1, you put a man in a tree. Act 2, you throw rocks at him. Act 3, you get him back down. There's the sense of a journey, of developments, of stakes being raised and then resolved. So first of all, what Aristotle defines as mimesis. The story must have verisimilitude. It must feel plausible. Now, that doesn't mean to say it has to be realism. Star Wars isn't realism, but it feels plausible because it has certain rules that govern that universe. We didn't stop to think about why there might be a Caucasian race somewhere else deep in the galaxy, you know, a long, long time ago who all speak English. We didn't ever stop. It doesn't make any sense, but we didn't ever stop to think about that because the world feels realistic enough that we look past that. We suspend our disbelief. Whereas on the other hand, The Dark Knight Rises, the third in the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, Batman gets his back broken, gets chucked down a hole somewhere in the Middle East, manages to climb out, and then suddenly appears back in Gotham again, ready to go. No buying that for a second. Even within this slightly fantastical world that Nolan sets out, that doesn't feel plausible. It doesn't have verisimilitude. 2, peripeteia, a reversal of fortunes of the main character. So the place that they start isn't the same place as they end. What are the values that are attached to them at the start? Scrooge, Christmas Carol, cynicism. Where does he end? Optimism, generosity. The story events have taken him from one place to the other. There's been a reversal in his fortunes. Hamartia, the protagonist's fate should be linked to his or her decisions. Now, this is a really important one to tell young people because they think storytelling is just a series of events in which there is a character. That character has to make decisions, moral decisions. Are they going to be redeemed or are they going to be damned by the end of that story? That's going to be linked to the decisions that they've made. We will feel that that ending is justified. And finally, and this is a tricky one for them sometimes, anagnorisis. The protagonist acknowledges their fate. Now, that doesn't mean to say at the end the protagonist goes, well, I have realised a result of this conflict has been that I will always stay loyal to my friends. You want to suggest that self-awareness. And the perfect example is at the end of The Godfather 2. I didn't acknowledge The Godfather 3. Right? It doesn't exist. Do you know, just a slight wee aside, my son went to see the Barbie movie with his mum. He's 7, right? And he came back buzzing. And he's like, Dad, you'll love it. They had a reference to The Godfather. And I was like, first of all, well chuffed that it had a reference to The Godfather in the Barbie movie, but also chuffed that he knew what The Godfather was. You know what I mean? Taught him well. Just building up to 10 years from now when I sit down and say, son, it's time to watch The Godfather. You'll be ready. Although then I realised the joke in the Barbie movie was, you've never seen The Godfather? I'm that guy. Michael Corleone, whose story it is, who at the start of Godfather 1 doesn't want involved with the mafia, doesn't want involved with the family business, thinks it's distasteful, he's a war hero, he's on the edge of the family. By the end of Godfather 2, not only has he become the Godfather, but he's now the most powerful gangster in America. However, by doing so, he has destroyed his family and lost his soul. So he becomes involved in the family business in order to protect his family, and in doing so, destroys his family. And there's one shot right at the end. Godfather 2, which is just a close-up on the face of Al Pacino. And he's just sitting in the garden, thinking. And the camera doesn't leave his face for about 25 seconds. Absolutely nothing else is happening. And you're like, oh, this is the moment he realises that he's lost his soul. And that is the protagonist acknowledging their fate. So if you can do all of those things, even within the confines of a short story, you've done it. You've fulfilled the prerequisites of storytelling. The other thing about structure that they sometimes have to think about is, well, it comes down to the basics, show, don't tell. They want to tell you everything because, especially when they start mastering it, they're so delighted to be finally enjoying creative writing that they put everything down on the page. And it's the equivalent of meeting somebody at a party who tells you their whole life story in the first 5 seconds of meeting them. And you're like, whoa, too much. Selectively edit, my friend, please. I didn't need to know that. And there are various ways you can teach them about that subtlety that they need in their writing. The example I always use is the best movie ever made, which, as we all know, is Jaws. Absolutely perfect piece of storytelling that not only hasn't aged, but only improves with age. The characterization, the pace, the structure, the dialogue, the writing, even the shark. I'm not having that, the shark looks fake business. It was 1975. You know what I mean? It was real enough looking to scare the shite out of you. So sit down. Showing them Jaws is a perfect way of teaching creative writing because it's got absolutely everything in it that you need. Perfect 3-act structure as well. But one of the things I say to them is, why is Jaws the scariest PG you've ever seen? And they kind of, feel their way around it. Oh, it's about a shark. Well, there's a lot of movies out there about sharks. Sharknado isn't scary. You know what I mean? All right. Oh, the music. Well, aye, the music suggests the shark. So you start to feel dread when you hear it. And then somebody who's seen Jaws comes up with it. You don't see the shark for the first hour of the movie. Boom. The not seeing the shark is what makes the shark terrifying. You see the fin. You see people getting pulled down under the water. You see blood. You hear the music. You see the effects of the shark, but you don't see the shark. So the shark that you imagine in your head is far more powerful and real than the shark that they're able to show with 1975 special effects. And so I draw a shark's fin and a series of waves and say, that's your story. What you show on the surface of your story should be suggestive of what's going on underneath. It's also called the iceberg theory of writing. And if you ever hear Ernest Hemingway or Raymond Carver talking about writing, that's what they subscribe to. There's a great quote for Raymond Carver when he talks about you can show the reader a fork sitting on a table and use that to suggest any number of things, depending on how you frame it, how you describe it, where it comes in the narrative. That fork can suggest death. That fork can suggest sustenance. That fork can suggest domesticity. That fork can suggest anything that you want it to. And that's the sort of subtlety that you want to try and imbue in them. How are we doing for time? I didn't want to take the piss or anything like that. How are we doing? Okay. We're okay? Right, okay. I'm going to give you an example. 4 minutes, right. So these are an example of opening lines from novels that I give the young people to suggest all of this, right? Vaughn died yesterday in his last car crash. Anybody know what that is the opening line from? Crash by J.G. Ballard. Not a book you should ever study with him. Just saying. Vaughn died yesterday in his last car crash. And I say to them, what's the one word in that sentence that's doing so much work? Last. Now, we've got a car crash. We've got somebody dying. That's a big dramatic opening. Last car crash. And you say to them, what does last suggest? Well, what does it suggest? It's happened before. It's happened many times. So what do we ask ourselves? Why? Why is this guy crashing so many cars? Why has he died in this car crash? Another one. They're out there. which is the opening line of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. They're out there. And you say to them, what questions are you asking yourself? Who's out there? Who's in here? Where is out there? It's only like 4 words in that sentence, and yet so many questions are generated. So what you want to do as a reader is use language in such a way that it's suggestive of so much more than is stated. The shark's fin, the fork in the table, last. So between helping them develop a style, between helping them understand how stories are structured, and encouraging them to be subtle in what they show, that's how you're going to teach them creative writing. Thank you.